My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it falls into 3 categories, which is fitness, cognition, and social. So what is it that we are getting so as women, when we're not putting that energy towards reproduction, that energy goes to another resource? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, again, the way I would teach this and try to explain to people who haven't obsessed about this as long as I have, is that what life histories in general are all about is these allocation trade-offs. How much goes into this thing, because more going into that means there's less into this other thing. And so that division between somatic maintenance, repair, and growth. So building this organism, then keeping it repaired and maintained, that takes the allocation of whatever is available has to go, how much goes there trades off again against how much goes into what's called current reproduction. And so the trade-offs there, well, first of all, it's going to determine whether you should continue to grow bigger before you mature. And then I can say why selection would favor that. Sometimes it depends on adult mortality. I mean, those are the best models we have. But what is the case that the more that the future pays off in fitness, the more there's an advantage to be around to get the payoff. And that means selection favors slower aging, more into somatic maintenance and repair, and less into current reproduction. And that's the history of our somatic versus current reproductive allocation. So more goes into, first making us bigger, we're bigger, and then before we stop growing and mature. And then actually we put less into current reproduction. Others are contributing. Grandmother is subsidizing. And so I put less as a mom and move on to have another. And so all kinds of things follow from that as well. And I this is why I keep saying, how did it take me so long to see how these other pieces of what characterizes us are connected to exactly that suite of changes in life history, because it's not only because we get half our genes from males, half from females. And so this slower aging applies not only to females, but to males as well. And we're mammals. And so in mammals generally, not just in us, females get all of the cells that are going to turn into ova very early in life, this finite state, and then it just depletes, cell death.
As we go on, right.
But, apparently we lose half of them before we're born in us.
Yes, I've heard that, yes.
Keep losing them before we start to menstruate, continue to lose them. If we're pregnant and lactating, we're still losing them anyway. That is continuing to go on until, if you live long enough, then you no longer cycle because you're not getting the suite of hormonal changes that would run a cycle.
Right.
But in mammal males, they continue to produce new sperm through adulthood. And that has these huge consequences that with the increasing fraction of post-menopausal females, there are also all these old males who are still fertile and therefore competing with the younger guys for paternities. And the only place they're going to get them is where there are going to be babies, right? So,
yes,
there is crucial in two ways. One is then you have way more males competing, and that has consequences for the strategies of male mating competition, which all kinds of, you can see this across the living world in birds. It's so visible. But anyway, all the modeling that shows when you have this male bias sex ratio in the fertile ages, then the strategy that wins for males is to claim a female and defend her against the other males. And that
Interesting.
is a way in which we can account for this pairing habit that characterizes us and distinguishes us from the other living
Right.
apes, from chimpanzees and bonobos and so on, right? So we
Yes.
do not do that. It is something you
Right.
see in human populations everywhere. And then the age structure of that, the old guys competing with the young guys. So the old guys who are ahead in developing their reputations and so on, then they dominate the young guys. So we get all of these features that are characterized as recurrent features of the patriarchy, recurrent features of human population.
I was just going to say, like, the more I listen to you, the more I'm like, and the wise, I believe that it's the wise female elder that it needs to be the hero of the culture right now. Because what I just heard is that even when men age, they're still, because of their reproductive status, they don't have this major shift that women get. And so and if you tie, I don't know if you've ever heard Lisa Mosconi, but Lisa Mosconi is a neuroscientist that says that when we go through menopause and we lose estrogen, that the brain reorganizes itself, that the neurons that we needed to keep ourselves in people pleasing and keep ourselves looking, attractive to the culture get pruned away, and new neurons come online that give us more of a social lens. And when I look at her research with your research, I'm like, wait a second. Hello, the menopausal woman is the evolutionary heroine here. She, instead of tossing us aside, people should be embracing us, because of, if you just looked at our design, we are incredibly needed for the culture. So that's how I see what you just said, is that we are in a category as post-menopausal women, we are in a category of our own because of this evolutionary design that we are built upon.
We are in a category of our own, but it is the case in socioecologies like ours, the tendency that, oh, wait a minute, I don't want my gray hair to show. I don't want
Right.
all of that kind of thing that goes with living in a socioecology where youth is absolutely considered to be so important.
Yes.
And especially when it comes to females. And so all of the things that characterize this tendency to want to still be considered sexually attractive, all of those things are a part of the socioecology we live in and the life history that has characterized this animal. And it is the reason that we have, all kinds of both pros and cons, because one of the things that goes with this, not only the male strategies, which initially I thought these were two interests of mine. What's going on with male strategies and the life history stuff? And I thought separate lines of research. And boy, in the last few years, I've seen, no, those things are so connected.
We're in a category of our own. Yeah.
Well, but the two things are so linked to the grandmother hypothesis can explain what the boys are up to, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing I mentioned, this is a different angle on brains, but the thing that goes with our slower development is also this slower neurogenesis, which results in the much bigger brain. But here are babies in our radiation that are maturing more slowly. So as I was saying, these chimpanzee babies are already, before they're one, they can do all this stuff. And where 1-year-old, human babies, no, I'm just a baby. But because the life history shift includes this earlier weaning, and that's so crucial to why the slower aging and the post-menopausal longevity was favored, because there were then more grandchildren and therefore more copies in the future. the babies who are developing so slowly, and now mom is having another one, and yet I am not able to even come close to think about feeding myself. And therefore, and this is where Sarah Hrdy had laid this in front of us almost a quarter of a century ago, and yet making this connection. And I have been so influenced by her in so many ways, but connecting these pieces, is still, why did it take so long? But so selection on babies to make the social relationship more important than anything. And the thing about human babies is this social precociousness, smiling, trying to, somebody, am I not so cute?
Yeah,
That is
the mirror, the mirror neurons. Like, yeah, there's definitely a draw to the adults around you as a human baby.
Absolutely. And trying,
Yeah,
somebody be sure to invest in me. Mom, what about me? All
yeah,
that stuff, which is not going on in the other apes. That's not an issue. And
right. Interesting.
was how selection on that social engagement, the importance of it, that it's was a survival strategy in these ancestral populations for babies. And as a consequence, selection for all this social stuff when motorically everything is so slow. And that results in this early wiring of our brains to make the social relationships take priority over it and end up with
amazing.
what and I are doing right here. So there's appetite. Or can we connect? Can you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
You get and you doing the same to me, that's close with this life history.
That started, yeah.